I still wake up some nights with the taste of spinach and ricotta in my mouth. Not the good kind of taste you get from a home-cooked meal, but something metallic and wrong, like licking a battery. It's been 12 years since that week in April, and I can't eat casseroles anymore. Can't even walk down the frozen food aisle without my hands starting to shake. My therapist says trauma manifests in strange ways. That smell triggers can transport you back to moments you'd rather forget. But she doesn't understand that it's not just the smell that haunts me. It's what I saw in my brother's room that night. What I did. What my parents knew all along. And if you think that's bad, you won't believe what happened next. The whole thing started 3 weeks before Jacob died. Not that anyone called it dying back then. Mom kept saying he was fighting and getting stronger and just needs his rest. But I was 14, not stupid. I could see what cancer does to a person. Jacob was 17 and had been sick for almost 2 years. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I memorized the words because adults always whispered them, like saying them too loud might make it worse. The treatments had been brutal. Chemotherapy that left him throwing up for days. Radiation that burned red squares into his chest. Experimental drugs that made his hair fall out in clumps I'd find scattered around the bathroom like tumbleweeds. Our house had become a shrine to denial. Mom covered every surface with get-well cards from people we barely knew. Relatives who hadn't called in years suddenly sent care packages filled with prayer cards and motivational books with titles like Miracles Happen Every Day and God's Plan for Healing. The living room coffee table disappeared under an avalanche of medical bills, appointment cards, and pamphlets about managing your child's cancer journey. Dad had taken a leave of absence from his job at the insurance company. He spent most of his time researching alternative treatments online, printing out articles about miracle cures and experimental therapies happening in Mexico or Germany. The walls of his home office were covered with post-it notes, dosages, doctor names, appointment times, insurance claim numbers. It looked like the workspace of a detective trying to solve an impossible case. But it was Mom who scared me the most. She'd always been the practical one, the parent who made sure we ate vegetables and did our homework. Now she'd become this manic cooking machine, churning out casserole after casserole as if she could somehow feed Jacob back to health. The kitchen counters were constantly covered with aluminum pans, tuna noodle, green bean, sweet potato, broccoli, cheese. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning to start cooking, and I'd fall asleep to the sound of her still chopping vegetables at midnight. Food is love, she'd say whenever I asked why she was making so much. And Jacob needs to know how much we love him. The problem was, Jacob hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. The chemo had destroyed his appetite, and even the smell of food made him nauseous. But Mom kept cooking anyway, storing the leftovers in our refrigerator, the garage refrigerator, and the chest freezer in the basement. Our house had become a casserole mausoleum. The last time I'd really talked to Jacob was during one of his good days about a month earlier. He'd managed to keep down some soup and was sitting up in bed, looking almost like his old self. We were playing a card game when he suddenly got serious. "Danny," he said, his voice hoarse from the medications, "I want you to know something." "What?" "When I'm gone." "You're not going anywhere," I interrupted. The way Mom had taught me to respond whenever he talked like that. "Listen to me," he said, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "When I'm gone, don't let them pretend it didn't happen. Don't let them act like I'm still here." I pulled my hand away. "That's weird, Jacob. You're being weird. Promise me." "I'm not promising anything because you're not going anywhere." He stared at me for a long moment, then lay back down and turned toward the wall. "Forget it," he said. "You're just a kid." That was the last real conversation we had. After that, the treatments got more aggressive and Jacob got sicker. He stopped coming out of his room except for doctor appointments. Mom and Dad would carry him to the car, and he'd sleep during the hour-long drive to the hospital. I'd sit in the waiting room while they met with doctors, playing Game Boy and trying not to listen to the hushed conversations happening around me. "The tumors have spread. His white cell count is critically low. We need to discuss quality of life options." I learned to read the expressions on my parents' faces when they came out of those meetings. Dad's fake smile. Mom's red-rimmed eyes. The way they'd both suddenly become very interested in discussing dinner plans or my homework, anything to avoid talking about what the doctors had actually said. The last hospital visit was different. Jacob was so weak he could barely sit up in the wheelchair. His skin had taken on a gray-green tint, and his eyes kept rolling back like he was trying to look at something inside his own head. The nurses moved around him with the careful, gentle manner reserved for the dying. "How long?" I heard Mom whisper to Dr. Martinez in the hallway. "Days," he said. "Maybe a week. We've done everything we can." "What about the new treatment you mentioned? The one in Houston?" "Mrs. Chun, Jacob's body can't handle another round of chemotherapy. It would be cruel at this point." Mom made a sound like a wounded animal. Dad put his arm around her shoulders, but she shrugged him off. "We're taking him home," she said. The drive back was a nightmare. Jacob was slumped against the window, making wet coughing sounds every few minutes. Pink foam bubbled from his mouth, and his breathing was shallow and ragged. Mom sat in the back seat next to him, holding his hand and talking in the bright, cheerful voice she'd been using with him for months. "We're going to get you settled in your room," she said. "I made your favorite casserole today, the spinach and ricotta one. Remember how much you loved it last time?" Jacob didn't respond. His eyes were closed, and his head lolled back and forth with the movement of the car. "Danny," Mom said to me, "tell Jacob about school. Tell him about your friends." I turned around to look at my brother. He looked like a corpse that someone had propped up in a car seat. His lips were blue, and I could see the outline of his skull through his paper-thin skin. I said, "My friends have been asking about you." This was a lie. My friends had stopped asking about Jacob months ago. They'd gotten uncomfortable with the subject, the way teenagers do when confronted with real tragedy. They'd started avoiding me, actually, like cancer might be contagious. "They miss you," I continued. "They keep asking when you're coming back to school." Another lie. Jacob had been out of school for over a year. "Tell him about the prank you pulled on Mrs. Henderson," Mom prompted. "What prank?" "The one with the tacks on her chair." I had no idea what she was talking about. I'd never pranked any teacher. But Mom was looking at me with desperate eyes, so I made something up. "Oh yeah," I said. "We put thumbtacks on Mrs. Henderson's chair." She sat down and jumped up screaming. It was hilarious. Jacob's eyes fluttered open for a moment. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he coughed, and more pink foam came out. This time it was thicker, almost solid. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, wiping his mouth with a tissue. "Your brother's so funny, isn't he?" When we got home, Dad carried Jacob to his room. He weighed maybe 90 pounds, and his limbs hung loose like a marionette with cut strings. Mom followed behind, carrying the portable oxygen tank the hospital had given us. "He just needs to rest," she announced to no one in particular as they disappeared down the hallway. "He'll feel better tomorrow." That was 3 days ago. Jacob hadn't come out of his room since. And now I was standing in the kitchen, watching Mom make her 6th casserole of the week while Dad talked about hospital food and pretended everything was normal. The smell of old gym socks was getting stronger, cutting through the aroma of cheese and herbs, and I was starting to understand what it meant. "Mom," I said again, "we need to check on Jacob." She kept stirring the ricotta mixture, her movements mechanical and precise. "He's resting," she said without looking up. "The doctors said he needs his rest." "But what if?" "What if what?" Dad interrupted. His voice had an edge to it now, like he was daring me to say what we were all thinking. "What if he's—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "He's what?" Dad's smile was getting wider, more manic. "He's what, Danny?" I looked back and forth between my parents. They were both staring at me now, waiting for my answer. Mom still had the wooden spoon in her hand, dripping ricotta onto the floor. Dad's hands were clenched into fists. "Nothing," I said. "Never mind." "That's right," Mom said, turning back to her cooking. "Nothing to worry about. Jacob's going to love this casserole when he gets his appetite back." But I knew my brother wasn't getting his appetite back. I knew he wasn't going to eat another casserole or get out of bed or flick my ear ever again. The smell wasn't Jim's socks. It was the smell of death, seeping under his bedroom door like poison gas. My parents knew it too. I could see it in Dad's desperate smile and Mom's mechanical cooking. They knew Jacob was gone, but they were pretending he wasn't. They were going to keep making casseroles and setting aside portions for him and talking about him like he was just sleeping, and they expected me to play along. I walked toward Jacob's room, my feet carrying me forward even though every instinct told me to run. The hallway felt longer than usual, stretching out like a tunnel. The smell got stronger with each step, sweet and sick and wrong. His door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with one finger. The room was dark except for a thin beam of evening light coming through the gap in the curtains. Jacob was lying on his back in the center of the bed, his arms straight at his sides. His mouth was open, and his eyes were staring at the ceiling. A thin trail of dried blood ran from his lips to his chin. I knew he was dead. I'd known it for hours, maybe days. But seeing him like that, so still, so empty, made it real in a way that hit me like a physical blow. I stepped closer to the bed. His skin had taken on a waxy, yellowish color, and his fingers were curled into strange positions. The puke bucket next to his bed was full of pink foam that had congealed into something resembling strawberry pudding. This was my brother, the person who used to wake me up by jumping on my bed, who taught me how to throw a curveball and sneak cookies from the kitchen, who read me comic books when I was little and couldn't sleep. Now he was just a thing, a body, an empty shell that used to contain Jacob but didn't anymore. I reached out and touched his face. His skin was cold and hard, like touching a mannequin. There was no warmth, no life, no Jacob. And then I did something I still can't fully explain. Something that's haunted me for 12 years. I flicked his ear, just like we used to do when we were kids. A quick snap with my middle finger against his earlobe. Our old game. But Jacob didn't move, didn't laugh, didn't flick me back, because Jacob was dead. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for something to happen. For him to sit up and scare me. For his eyes to blink. For some sign that this was all a terrible dream. Nothing. I walked out of the room and closed the door behind me. By the time I reached the kitchen, I had already started forgetting what I'd seen. My mind was protecting itself, creating a buffer between reality and what I could handle. "Did you check on Jacob?" Mom asked as I walked in. "He's sleeping," I said. "Good. He needs his rest." I heated up 4 plates of spinach and ricotta casserole. When they were done, I wrapped Jacob's plate in aluminum foil and put it in the oven to keep warm. Then Mom, Dad, and I sat in the dining room and ate in silence. Jacob's place was set at the table. His favorite cup was filled with water. His napkin was folded next to his plate. We ate and pretended he was just in his room, resting, getting better, building up his strength. But I knew the truth. And the truth was that my parents had known Jacob was dead for days. They'd been setting aside food for a corpse, talking about him like he was alive, maintaining the fiction that he was just sleeping. And I was part of it now, part of the lie. After dinner, Mom made another casserole. Dad talked about taking Jacob to see a movie when he felt better. I went to my room and tried to do homework, but I couldn't concentrate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jacob's face. His cold skin, his empty eyes. The smell was getting stronger. Even with my door closed, I could smell it. Sweet and sick and wrong. Around midnight, I heard Mom in the kitchen again, making another casserole. The sound of chopping vegetables. The oven door opening and closing. The mechanical rhythm of someone trying to cook away their grief. I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of my family pretending everything was normal. Dad watching late-night television. Mom cooking. The house settling around us like a tomb. And Jacob in his room not sleeping. Not getting better. Not building up his strength. Just being dead. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to the sound of voices in the hallway. It was morning, and sunlight was streaming through my window. For a moment, I thought maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Maybe Jacob was okay. Maybe. "The smell is getting worse," I heard Dad say. "I know," Mom replied. I've been burning candles all night. We can't keep this up much longer. Just a few more days. Please. I'm not ready. I crept to my door and peered out. My parents were standing in the hallway, looking toward Jacob's room. Mom was holding a plate of food breakfast, probably. Dad had his hand on her shoulder. The neighbors are going to notice, Dad said. Let them notice. He's our son. He's gone, Margaret. He's been gone for days. Don't say that. Mom's voice was sharp. Don't you dare say that. They stood there for a long moment, not moving. Then Mom walked to Jacob's door and knocked softly. Jacob? I made you some eggs. Your favorite kind, with cheese. No answer. Jacob? Are you awake, honey? Still nothing. Mom opened the door and went inside. I heard her moving around, probably setting down the plate. Then she came back out, closing the door behind her. He's still sleeping, she said to Dad. But he looks peaceful. Dad nodded, but I could see the strain in his face. The way his jaw was clenched. The dark circles under his eyes. They both knew. They'd always known. But they were going to keep pretending until someone made them stop. I got dressed and went to the kitchen. Mom was making pancakes, humming softly to herself. Dad was reading the newspaper or pretending to. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and syrup, but underneath it all was that other smell. Getting stronger. Good morning, sweetie, Mom said without looking up. I made extra pancakes for Jacob. He loves pancakes. I sat down at the table. Jacob's place was set again. His orange juice was poured. His napkin was folded. When do you think he'll wake up? I asked. Soon, Mom said. He's been sleeping a lot lately, but that's good. Sleep is healing. Dad looked up from his newspaper. Our eyes met for a moment and I saw something there, a kind of desperate pleading, like he was begging me to understand why they were doing this. I ate my pancakes in silence. When I was done, Mom wrapped up Jacob's portion and put it in the refrigerator with all the other meals he wasn't going to eat. I'm going to school, I said. Have a good day, honey, Mom said. Tell Jacob's teachers that he's doing much better, that he'll be back soon. I walked to school in a daze. The normal world felt surreal after spending the night in our house of lies. Other kids were complaining about homework and talking about weekend plans. They had no idea that I'd spent the last 3 days eating dinner with a corpse. During lunch, I sat alone and tried to figure out what to do. I could tell a teacher, call the police, do something to make the pretending stop. But what would happen then? They'd take Jacob away. My parents would be in trouble. Our family would be destroyed. And for what? Jacob was already gone. Making it official wouldn't bring him back. I decided to go home and pretend along with them, just for a little while, just until I could figure out what else to do. But when I got home, things had gotten worse, much worse. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the front door. It was so strong now that it made my eyes water. Mom had lit candles everywhere, on the coffee table, the kitchen counter, the mantel. The house looked like a shrine. How was school? Mom asked. She was making another casserole, this one with ground beef and corn. Her movements were more frantic now, almost violent. She was attacking the vegetables with the knife. Fine, I said. Where's Dad? He went to the store. We're running low on ingredients. I looked toward the hallway. Jacob's door was closed, but I could see light underneath it. Mom had been in there recently. Did you check on Jacob? I asked. Of course. He's much better today. He even asked for some water. This was a lie. Jacob hadn't asked for anything. Jacob couldn't ask for anything. That's good, I said. I think he might be ready to eat some real food soon. Maybe some soup. Or pudding. He used to love chocolate pudding. Mom's voice was getting higher, more manic. She was talking faster, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I should go say hi to him, I said. No. Mom's voice was sharp. He's sleeping again. Don't disturb him. But I was already walking toward the hallway. I needed to see. I needed to know how bad it had gotten. Danny, stop. I kept walking. Danny, I said stop. I reached Jacob's door and put my hand on the knob. Please, Mom said behind me. Her voice was breaking. Please don't. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The smell hit me like a physical force. It was so strong that I had to cover my nose and mouth with my shirt. The room was lit by several candles that Mom had placed around the bed. They created a warm, flickering glow that made everything look almost holy. Jacob was still lying in the same position, but he'd changed. His skin had darkened to a deep purple-black color. His body was swollen, distorted. His face was unrecognizable. But Mom had been taking care of him. She'd combed his hair and dressed him in a clean shirt. She'd placed fresh flowers on his nightstand. She'd arranged his hands in a peaceful position on his chest. There was a plate of food on the nightstand. Eggs and toast now covered in flies. A glass of orange juice that had grown a skin of mold. He looks peaceful, doesn't he? Mom said from behind me. I turned around. She was standing in the doorway, smiling. Actually smiling. Mom, I said. He's dead. Don't say that word in this house. He's been dead for days. You know that. He's resting. He's getting better. Look at him, Mom. Really look at him. She walked over to the bed and sat down next to Jacob's body. She reached out and touched his face, the same way I had the night before. He's a little warm, she said. I think his fever is breaking. I stared at her. My own mother, sitting next to a rotting corpse and talking about fevers. We need to call someone, I said. Call who? The hospital. The police. Someone. Why would we do that? Jacob's fine. He's not fine. He's dead. Mom turned to look at me. Her eyes were wild, desperate. If you say that word one more time, I'm going to ask you to leave this house. Mom! I mean it, Danny. I will not have that kind of negativity around Jacob while he's trying to recover. I looked back at Jacob, at the body that used to be my brother, at the flies buzzing around his face, at the stains on his shirt. Okay, I said. I won't say it. Good. Now come help me make lunch. I want to make Jacob's favorite sandwich. He used to love peanut butter and jelly. I followed Mom back to the kitchen. She was humming again, that same tune she'd been humming all morning. She moved around the kitchen with purpose, like she was preparing for a dinner party. Can you get the jelly from the refrigerator? She asked. I opened the refrigerator. It was packed with covered dishes, leftovers from all the meals Jacob hadn't eaten. Casseroles and soups and sandwiches, all growing mold and attracting flies. Mom, I said, the food is spoiled. What food? All of it. It's all gone bad. She looked over my shoulder into the refrigerator. For a moment, I saw recognition in her eyes, a flicker of understanding. Then it was gone. That's not spoiled, she said. That's just aged, like cheese. Jacob likes aged cheese. She reached past me and grabbed a container of what used to be potato salad. It was green now, covered in fuzzy mold. She opened it and took a sniff. Perfect, she said. This will go great with the sandwiches. I watched her make lunch. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with moldy potato salad. She arranged everything on a tray with a cloth napkin and a flower from the garden. Will you take this to Jacob? She asked. Tell him I made it with extra love. I looked at the tray, at the food that would kill anyone who ate it, at the flower that was already wilting. Sure, I said. I carried the tray down the hallway. The smell was getting stronger by the hour. I could hear flies buzzing behind Jacob's door. I knocked softly. Jacob? I have lunch for you. No answer. I opened the door and went inside. The candles were still burning, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jacob's body was exactly where I'd left it, but the decay was progressing rapidly now. The smell was overwhelming. I set the tray on the nightstand next to the other untouched meals. Then I sat down in the chair beside the bed. Hey, Jacob, I said. It's me. I felt stupid talking to a corpse, but I needed to say something, to acknowledge what was happening. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry I didn't come see you more when you were sick. I was scared. The body didn't respond. Of course it didn't. I'm scared now too. I don't know what to do. Mom and Dad are pretending you're still alive, and I don't know how to make them stop. I reached out and touched Jacob's hand. It was cold and stiff, like touching a piece of wood. I miss you, I said. I miss our stupid ear-flicking game. I miss having a brother. I sat there for a long time just talking to Jacob's corpse, telling him about school, about my friends, about how much I missed him. It felt good to finally be honest with someone, even if that someone was dead. When I finally left the room, Mom was waiting in the hallway. "How is he?" she asked. I paused. "He's resting." "Good. Did he eat anything?" "Not yet, but he will." Mom smiled. I knew he was getting better. That evening, Dad came home with bags of groceries. More ingredients for more casseroles. More food for Jacob to not eat. "How's our patient?" he asked. "Much better," Mom said. "Danny says he's been talking." Dad looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. "Just a little," I said. "He's still pretty weak." "Of course he is," Dad said. "But he's fighting. He's a fighter." We made dinner together. Another casserole, this one with chicken and rice. Mom wrapped Jacob's portion and put it in the refrigerator with all the others. "I should take him some water," she said. "I'll do it," I said quickly. I filled a glass with water and carried it to Jacob's room. The smell was now so strong that I had to breathe through my mouth. I set the glass on the nightstand and looked at my brother. He was decomposing rapidly now. His skin was black and green, and fluids were leaking from his body onto the sheets. Maggots were crawling in and out of his mouth. But Mom had been visiting him regularly. She changed his clothes again and arranged fresh flowers around the bed. She'd even put a get well card on his nightstand, one that she'd bought at the store. "Get well soon," it said in cheerful letters. "Hope you feel better." I laughed. Actually laughed. The whole situation was so insane, so surreal, that laughter was the only response that made sense. My brother was rotting in his bed, and my parents were buying him get-well cards. I went back to the kitchen and sat down for dinner. We ate in silence, with Jacob's place set and ready. Mom had even put a bib around his chair, like he was a baby. "I think Jacob might be ready to come out of his room tomorrow," she said suddenly. Dad dropped his fork. "What?" "He's been asking to watch TV. I think he's feeling strong enough to come to the living room." "Margaret," Dad said carefully, "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "He's been cooped up in that room for days. He needs fresh air. He needs to stay in bed." The doctor said he was getting better, that he was responding to treatment. This was a lie. The doctor had said Jacob was dying. But Mom had constructed an entire alternate reality where Jacob was recovering. "Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez," Dad said. "Get his opinion." "We don't need a doctor," Mom said. "We just need to keep taking care of Jacob. Keep feeding him. Keep loving him." After dinner, I went to my room and tried to do homework. But I couldn't concentrate. The smell was seeping through the walls now, getting into everything. My clothes, my bedsheets, my hair. I opened my window and breathed in the fresh air. It was like stepping out of a tomb. I could hear Mom in the kitchen, making another casserole. The sound of chopping vegetables. The oven door opening and closing. The mechanical rhythm of someone trying to cook away reality. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Mom was going to check on Jacob again. I crept to my door and listened. I heard her knock softly, then go into the room. She was in there for a long time, talking to Jacob like he was awake. "How are you feeling, honey? Are you hungry? I made your favorite casserole, the spinach and ricotta one." She was talking to a corpse that was crawling with maggots. When she finally came out, I heard her crying. Soft, muffled sobs that she was trying to keep quiet. She knew. Part of her knew. But she was going to keep pretending anyway. The next morning, things got even worse. I woke up to the sound of Mom talking loudly in the kitchen. "Good morning, Jacob," she was saying. "Did you sleep well? Are you ready for breakfast?" I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. Mom was standing at the stove cooking eggs. She was talking to an empty chair at the table. "I made your favorite," she said to the chair. Scrambled eggs with cheese. Just the way you like them. Dad was sitting at the table, staring at his coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Morning, Danny, he said without looking up. Morning. I sat down across from him. Where's Jacob? He's right there, Mom said, pointing to the empty chair. He came out for breakfast. He's feeling much better today. I looked at the chair. It was empty. Obviously empty. I can't see him, I said. That's because you're not looking hard enough, Mom said. He's right there. Say hi to your brother. I looked at Dad. He was staring at the empty chair with a mixture of horror and resignation. Hi, Jacob, I said. See, Mom said. He's waving at you. She set a plate of eggs in front of the empty chair. Then she sat down and started eating, occasionally glancing at the chair and smiling. Eat up, Jacob, she said. You need your strength. This went on for the entire meal. Mom talking to the empty chair, Dad staring into his coffee, and me trying to figure out how to navigate this new level of insanity. When breakfast was over, Mom cleared Jacob's untouched plate. Jacob wants to watch TV, she announced. He's feeling strong enough to sit on the couch. She walked to the living room and patted the couch cushion. Here's a good spot, she said to no one. Let me get you a blanket. She brought a blanket from the closet and draped it over the empty couch, tucking it in around an invisible body. There, she said. Nice and cozy. She turned on the TV and sat down next to the empty space. What do you want to watch? She asked. Oh, you like this show? Okay, we'll watch this. I looked at Dad. He was standing in the doorway, watching his wife talk to nothing. Dad, I whispered. We need to do something. Like what? Call someone. Get help. Help with what? His voice was bitter. Help with the fact that our son is dead? Help with the fact that your mother has lost her mind? What kind of help is there for that? We can't just let her keep doing this. Watch me. He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with Mom and her invisible Jacob. I sat down in the chair across from the couch. Mom was stroking the empty space next to her, like she was petting someone's hair. Jacob's hair is growing back, she said to me. The chemo made it fall out, but it's growing back now. So soft. I watched her hands move through empty air. That's good, I said. He wants to know if you'll play cards with him later. Sure. He's missed playing with you. He says you're his favorite brother. I'm his only brother. He knows that. He's just being silly. She laughed, like Jacob had said something funny. This continued for hours. Mom talking to empty air, responding to questions that no one was asking, laughing at jokes that no one was telling. And the whole time, Jacob's actual body was rotting in his bedroom, attracting flies and filling the house with the smell of death. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to Jacob's room and opened the door. The sight that greeted me was horrific. Jacob's body was barely recognizable now. It was bloated and black, leaking fluids onto the mattress. The smell was so intense that I immediately started gagging. But Mom had been in there recently. She'd changed the sheets around the body. She'd put fresh flowers on the nightstand. She'd even opened the window to let in some fresh air. There was a note on the nightstand, written in Mom's handwriting. Dear Jacob, I hope you're feeling better today. I made your favorite casserole. It's in the kitchen when you're ready to eat. I love you so much. Love, Mom. I stared at the note. She'd written a letter to a corpse. I closed the door and went back to the living room. Mom was still on the couch, still talking to nothing. Jacob wants to go for a walk, she said. He thinks the fresh air will do him good. Mom, I said. Jacob is dead. She looked at me with confusion. What are you talking about? He's right here. No, he's not. He's in his room. He's been dead for days. Don't be silly. He's sitting right next to me. She patted the empty couch cushion. Jacob, tell Danny you're fine. She paused, like she was listening to something. He says he's feeling much better. The treatment is working. I realized that arguing with her was pointless. She wasn't going to accept reality no matter what I said. so I decided to play along, just until I could figure out what else to do. You're right, I said. He does look better. See? I told you. He's been asking about you all morning. What did he say? He wants to know if you'll help him with his homework when he goes back to school. Jacob had been out of school for over a year. He was never going back. Of course, I said. I'd be happy to help. Mom smiled. He's so excited. He missed learning. This went on for the rest of the day. Mom carrying on full conversations with empty air while Jacob's body decomposed in his bedroom. Dad disappeared for most of the afternoon, claiming he had errands to run, but I knew he just couldn't handle being in the house. When evening came, Mom announced that Jacob was getting tired and needed to go back to his room. Come on, honey, she said to the empty couch. Let's get you back to bed. She stood up and walked toward the hallway, looking back occasionally like she was making sure Jacob was following her. Careful on the stairs, she said. I know you're still weak. We didn't have stairs. Jacob's room was on the same floor as the living room. She went into Jacob's room and I heard her talking to the corpse. Here, let me help you into bed. Are you comfortable? Do you need another pillow? She was talking to a body that was so decomposed it was barely human anymore. When she came back out, she closed the door gently behind her. He's resting now, she said. He had a big day. That night at dinner, Mom set Jacob's place at the table as usual. But this time she started serving food onto his plate. Jacob's hungry tonight, she said. He worked up an appetite being out of bed all day. She put a full serving of casserole on his plate, along with vegetables and bread. Then she sat down and started eating, occasionally looking at the empty chair and smiling. Slow down, Jacob, she said. You don't want to make yourself sick. I watched as she had a full conversation with no one, responding to questions that weren't being asked, laughing at jokes that weren't being told. Jacob wants to know if we can rent a movie tomorrow, she said to Dad. He's feeling strong enough to stay up late. Dad didn't respond. He was staring at Jacob's full plate with a look of absolute horror. Dad, Mom said, did you hear Jacob's question? I heard it, Dad said quietly. Well, can we rent a movie? Sure, whatever Jacob wants. After dinner, Mom started clearing the table. She picked up Jacob's plate, which was still full of food. Jacob couldn't finish everything, she said, but he ate most of it. That's a good sign. She dumped the untouched food in the garbage and put the plate in the dishwasher. He's getting his appetite back, she said. I think he's finally turning the corner. I went to bed that night feeling like I was losing my mind. The smell from Jacob's room was now so strong that it was seeping through the entire house. I could taste it in my mouth, feel it in my lungs. I lay in bed and tried to think of what to do. I could call the police, but what would I tell them? That my parents were pretending my dead brother was still alive? That my mother was having conversations with empty air? They'd think I was crazy. Or they'd blame me for not doing something sooner. I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up to the sound of Mom screaming. It was the middle of the night, and she was screaming like someone was murdering her. I ran to the hallway and saw her standing outside Jacob's room, her hands pressed to her face. What's wrong? I asked. Jacob, she said. He's. She couldn't finish the sentence. Dad came running from their bedroom. What happened? Jacob, Mom said again. He's sick. He's really sick. Dad and I looked at each other. We both knew what she'd found. Let me look, Dad said. He went into Jacob's room and immediately came back out, his face pale. We need to call someone, he said. No, Mom said. We can take care of him ourselves. We don't need outsiders. Margaret, look at me. Dad grabbed her shoulders. We need to call the coroner. We need to call the funeral home. He's not dead, Mom said. He's just sick. He needs a doctor. He needs a coroner. Don't say that word. He's been dead for almost a week. We all know it. No. Mom was shaking her head violently. He was just talking to me. He was just eating dinner. He was just watching TV. None of that was real. It was real to me. Dad looked at me. Danny, go to your room. No, I said. I'm not leaving. This isn't something you need to see. I've already seen it. I've seen everything. Dad stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. But we're doing this now. Tonight. No more pretending. He went to the phone and dialed 911. Yes, I need to report a death, he said. My son. He's been dead for several days. Mom collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. You're killing him, she said. You're killing our son. He's already dead, Dad said gently. He's been dead since Monday. The paramedics arrived within minutes, followed by the police and the coroner. They took one look at Jacob's room and immediately called for backup. How long has he been deceased? The coroner asked. 5 days, Dad said. Maybe 6. And you didn't call anyone? We weren't ready. The coroner looked at Dad with a mixture of disgust and pity. This is a crime scene now. We need to treat it as such. They made us leave the house while they worked. We sat in the back of an ambulance while strangers in hazmat suits carried my brother's body out in a black bag. Mom was catatonic. She sat between Dad and me, staring at nothing, not speaking. Is she okay? The paramedic asked. She's been talking to him, I said. For days. She thought he was still alive. That's not uncommon, the paramedic said. Grief can make people do strange things. Strange things. Like cooking dinner for a corpse. Like having conversations with empty air. Like pretending death doesn't exist. The police asked us questions. When did Jacob die? Why didn't we call anyone? Did we understand that what we'd done was illegal? Dad answered most of them. He explained about Jacob's cancer, about the treatments, about how we'd brought him home to die. He said we'd been planning to call someone, but we just needed a few more days. A few more days for what? The detective asked. To say goodbye, Dad said. But that wasn't true. We'd had months to say goodbye. We'd had years. What we'd needed was a few more days to pretend that goodbye wasn't necessary. They let us go home that night, but the house felt different. Empty. The smell was gone, but so was everything else. Jacob's room was sealed off with police tape. The kitchen was cleaned out. All of Mom's casseroles had been thrown away as potential health hazards. Mom went straight to bed and didn't come out for 3 days. Dad and I sat in the living room, not talking. There was nothing to say. Jacob was gone, and we'd wasted his last week pretending he wasn't. I should have done something sooner, I said finally. Like what? Called someone. Made you stop. You were 14, Dad said. This wasn't your responsibility. Then whose was it? He didn't answer. The funeral was small. Just a few relatives and some of Jacob's friends from before he got sick. Mom sat in the front row, staring at the casket with empty eyes. The pastor talked about Jacob's life, about how he'd fought bravely against his illness. He said Jacob was in a better place now, free from pain and suffering. But all I could think about was the last week. About the casseroles and the empty chairs and the conversations with corpses. About how we'd turned Jacob's death into a grotesque puppet show. After the service, people came up to us and said the usual things. I'm sorry for your loss. He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering anymore. A few people mentioned how hard it must have been, taking care of Jacob at home during his final days. If only they knew what taking care of him had actually meant. Dad went back to work after a few weeks. Mom didn't leave her room for 2 months. When she finally did, she was different. Quieter. More fragile. She never cooked another casserole. I went back to school and tried to pretend everything was normal. My friends asked about Jacob and I gave them the standard responses. He died peacefully at home. He wasn't suffering anymore. We were doing okay. But I wasn't okay. I kept having nightmares about that last week. About the smell, and the flies, and the way Mom had stroked empty air like she was petting someone's hair. I started seeing a therapist. She helped me understand that what had happened wasn't my fault. That grief makes people do irrational things. That my parents had been trying to protect themselves from a pain too terrible to bear. but understanding it didn't make it easier to live with. The therapist asked me about my last interaction with Jacob. I told her about flicking his ear, about how I tried to play our old game with his corpse. "Why do you think you did that?" she asked. "I don't know. I guess I was trying to make him respond, to make him be Jacob again." "And how did it feel when he didn't respond? Like he was really gone? And that's when you knew?" "I already knew. I'd known for days. But that's when I felt it." She nodded. "Sometimes we need to feel something before we can accept it. But I never did accept it. Not really. Even now, 12 years later, I sometimes catch myself setting an extra place at the table. Or buying two of something when I only need one. Or talking to empty rooms like someone's listening. The smell never completely went away either. Not from the house and not from my memory. We moved 6 months after Jacob died. But I can still smell it sometimes. When I'm stressed, or tired, or thinking too hard about that week. My parents divorced 3 years later. Dad said they'd become strangers to each other. That the shared experience of losing Jacob had somehow driven them apart instead of bringing them together. "We both know what we did," he said. "And we can't look at each other without remembering." Mom moved to Florida and started over. She remarried, had another child. When I talk to her now, she never mentions Jacob. It's like he never existed. Dad remarried too, but it didn't last. He drinks too much now, and sometimes he calls me late at night to talk about Jacob. About how they should have called someone sooner. About how they let him rot in his own bed while they played house with his corpse. "We were sick," he says. "We were all sick." Maybe he's right. Maybe what happened that week wasn't about denial or grief or love. Maybe it was about a family that had been broken by cancer and death, and had finally snapped under the pressure. But I don't think that's the whole truth. I think part of us knew exactly what we were doing. Part of us chose to pretend Jacob was alive because the alternative was too terrible to face. And in some ways, we're still pretending. Dad pretends alcohol makes it hurt less. Mom pretends Jacob never existed. I pretend that talking to therapists and taking pills makes me normal. But none of us can pretend away the memory of that week. The smell, the flies, the conversations with corpses, the casseroles that nobody ate. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been braver. If I'd called the police on that first night when I found Jacob's body. If I'd refused to play along with Mom's delusions. Would Jacob have had a dignified death? Would my parents have gotten the help they needed? Would our family have stayed together? Or would it have just been a different kind of hell? I'll never know. All I know is that for 1 week in April 12 years ago, my family lost their minds. We turned death into a dinner party, decay into denial, and grief into a grotesque game of pretend. And the worst part of me misses it. Part of me misses the week when Jacob was still alive, even if he wasn't. When we were still a family, even if we were insane. When love was strong enough to make us believe impossible things. Even if those impossible things were lies. I still have dreams about that week. Dreams where I'm sitting at the dinner table, and Jacob's place is set, and Mom is serving casserole to an empty chair. In the dreams, I can smell the food and hear the conversation and feel the warmth of the candles. And in the dreams, Jacob is really there. Not his corpse, but Jacob, my brother, laughing at Dad's jokes and asking for seconds and complaining about the vegetables. In the dreams, love is enough. Denial works. Death can be defeated by casseroles and conversation and the refusal to say goodbye. But then I wake up, and the dream fades, and I'm left with the truth. Jacob is dead. He's been dead for 12 years. And no amount of casseroles or conversation or love can bring him back. That's the real horror of that week. Not the corpse or the smell or the flies. It's the knowledge that love isn't enough. That sometimes the people we love most are the ones we hurt the worst. That grief can turn us into monsters, and we'll call it caring. My brother died on a Monday in April, but we didn't bury him until the following Sunday. For 6 days, we kept him alive through sheer force of will and an endless supply of spinach and ricotta casserole. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment and the shadows are long and the silence is heavy, I can almost convince myself that it worked. that somewhere, in some other reality, Jacob is still alive, still talking, still eating mom's casseroles and playing our stupid ear-flicking game. But then I remember the smell, and the flies, and the way his skin felt when I touched it. Cold and hard and wrong. And I remember that some games end whether we want them to or not. Some people never come back, no matter how many places we set at the table. Some stories don't have happy endings, no matter how hard we pretend they do. This story was completely true, except for all the parts that weren't. Thanks for listening. That's how it happened or didn't. But if it did, don't think it couldn't happen to you. Subscribe to It Happened to Me. A new story drops daily.